We're back with breaking news out of Virginia, where Attorney General Pam Bondi just confirmed the FBI executed a search warrant at the home of a Washington Post journalist. Bondi says the journalist was, quote, obtaining and reporting classified and illegally leaked information from the Pentagon contractor, who she adds is currently behind bars. Hannah Natanson, who covers the federal workforce, was at her home when this search was executed. The Post says she has been part of the publication's most high-profile and sensitive coverage during the first year of the second Trump administration. Let's bring in MS Now senior legal reporter Lisa Rubin and MS Now legal analyst, former Manhattan Assistant District Attorney Catherine Christian. Lisa, what do you make of Bondi's comments on this investigation, this search warrant? Just how unusual is all of this?
Well, it's incredibly unusual. Let's start with the fact that in April of last year, Pam Bondi rescinded a Department of Justice policy that was promulgated by then Attorney General Merrick Garland during the Biden administration. And in place of that policy, she put in a new policy to make it easier for the Department of Justice to conduct searches of journalists' home and offices when the Department of Justice is conducting a leak investigation. She essentially said that this Department of Justice would not tolerate the leaks.
Something shifted in Washington the moment federal agents stepped onto that quiet Virginia street. Neighbors didn't know it yet, but what they were witnessing wasn't just another investigation. It was the first domino in a chain reaction that would throw the entire government into a state of open political warfare. The raid on a journalist's home was the spark, but the fire that followed spread far beyond that doorstep. Within hours, lawmakers were demanding resignations, calling for removals, and insisting the administration was no longer fit to govern. And once that drumbeat started, it didn't slow down. It only grew louder. At the center of the storm was a Washington Post reporter known for covering some of the most sensitive stories coming out of the federal workforce. She was home when the FBI executed a search warrant, something so rare that even veteran legal analysts had to pause. The reason, according to public statements, involved allegations of obtaining and reporting classified or illegally leaked material from a Pentagon contractor. The twist? That contractor was already behind bars. And when the Attorney General confirmed the operation, she added another layer. She had changed DOJ policy months earlier, removing long-standing restrictions that once made searching a journalist's home nearly impossible. That single policy reversal now stood at the center of a national controversy, and the political temperature spiked instantly. But the raid itself wasn't even the most explosive part. What followed was a wave of political demands unlike anything seen in modern Washington. Lawmakers, mostly from one side of the aisle, didn't simply criticize the administration. They launched a coordinated pressure campaign targeting some of the most powerful positions in the federal government. The message was blunt: resign or be removed. Not someday, not after hearings, not after an investigation, right now. They listed officials by name, tied each one to specific failures, and warned that the government itself had become a threat to national security and public safety. And whether those accusations were fair or exaggerated, the escalation was undeniable. The first blast of pressure landed on the national security team. A leaked series of encrypted chat messages revealed troubling back and forth about military strikes. Those leaks, according to reports, raised red flags about the handling of sensitive battlefield details. The Secretary of Defense was suddenly painted as reckless and unable to safeguard critical information. Lawmakers pointed to the leaks as evidence of dangerous judgment, arguing that anyone overseeing military operations should be held to a much higher standard. As calls for his resignation gained traction, analysts noted how rare it was for a defense secretary to be the target of such direct political outrage outside of a formal scandal. Yet here it was, unfolding in real time. Intelligence officials were next. The Director of National Intelligence, the CIA Director, and the FBI Director all came under fire, not for a single incident, but for what critics described as a pattern of loyalty-driven appointments. The concern, as framed by lawmakers, was that these officials were chosen not for expertise, but for their alignment with the president's worldview. Some reports claimed that certain intelligence briefings had been manipulated or filtered in ways that raised eyebrows among career analysts. Although those claims remain unverified and heavily disputed, they fueled the perception that the intelligence community was no longer functioning independently. Critics argued that when the people responsible for analyzing threats seem more focused on protecting political power than protecting the country, the system becomes unstable. And as soon as that narrative took hold, calls for their resignations followed. Then came the backlash against immigration enforcement. Reports of ICE operations growing more aggressive drew intense scrutiny. Incidents involving deadly force became the centerpiece of floor speeches demanding the Homeland Security Secretary step down. Critics described a pattern of escalating tactics, raids conducted with alarming speed, enforcement decisions that seemed out of proportion to the circumstances, and actions that left families terrified. Supporters of the administration insisted agents were simply enforcing the law. Detractors said the department had crossed ethical and moral boundaries, and when lawmakers used the phrase human rights abuses, the political stakes shot even higher. Those 3 words changed the entire conversation. Resignation wasn't just requested, it was framed as a moral obligation. But the pressure didn't stop with cabinet officials. It moved straight to the top. Multiple lawmakers publicly accused the president of unfitness and abuse of power, citing operations abroad, threats against judges and lawmakers, and the alleged misuse of federal agencies. Impeachment resolutions had already been drafted months earlier, but now they were resurfacing as part of a broader removal effort. Each time a lawmaker stepped to a microphone and said, "Remove him," it added weight to the argument that the country was entering uncharted territory. And then came something even more shocking. Calls to invoke the 25th Amendment began circulating. For members of Congress to claim a sitting president is mentally unfit is almost unheard of. Yet here it was, posted publicly, echoed repeatedly, and amplified across social media. Of course, the 25th Amendment was never a realistic option. It requires a vice president and a cabinet willing to declare the president unable to serve, and in this case, both were loyal. Even if they weren't, any contested decision would require a supermajority in both chambers of Congress, something mathematically impossible given the political makeup. But the point wasn't whether the 25th could succeed. The point was that lawmakers were willing to say the words out loud. That alone signaled a level of political fracture rarely seen in American governance. All of this fed into a broader strategy that had little to do with immediate removal and everything to do with long-term positioning. Every resignation demand, every public statement, every resolution introduced in Congress created a paper trail that could be used later. Lawmakers weren't just criticizing, they were building a case. Their argument was simple. We tried to get accountability peacefully, and the administration refused every single time. That refusal became the evidence used to justify future action. It also became a powerful campaign message heading into the next election. Voters frustrated with the administration were told, "Give us power, and we'll finish what we started." Inside government, the effect was real. Officials began calculating the cost of staying in their positions. Some reportedly worried that following controversial orders could put them at the center of the next resignation push. Others kept their heads down, fearing that being associated with certain decisions could damage their careers beyond repair. Even if the administration outwardly brushed off the criticism, internally, it created pressure. Political pressure rarely removes people directly, but it often influences how they behave. And in moments of crisis, behavior is everything. The administration's response was absolute refusal. No resignations, no concessions, no admissions of error. The message was consistent: they're staying. And if lawmakers want them out, they'll have to remove them through formal votes. That defiance became its own political weapon. It energized supporters who saw the pressure campaign as overreach, and it infuriated critics who viewed the refusal as proof of unfitness. In the end, the issue wasn't whether resignations would happen now. They wouldn't. The real question was what voters would decide when they finally had the power to act. And that brings everything to the 2026 election. For one side, the election represents the moment they can force accountability through impeachment, oversight, and confirmation battles. For the other, it's the chance to protect the administration and reject what they view as partisan attacks. Every demand, every refusal, every speech, every leaked message becomes ammunition for one side or the other. The raid that started this entire chain reaction didn't topple anyone on its own, but it set off a political storm powerful enough to redefine the next election. Whether the administration survives that storm depends entirely on whether voters believe the pressure campaign is justified or extreme. The country is now watching a government operating under siege. Cabinet members are being told they're unfit. Lawmakers are calling for the president's removal. Intelligence, defense, and homeland security officials are being named publicly as threats to national stability. None of the mechanisms have succeeded yet, but the pressure is relentless. And with every refusal to step down, the stakes climb higher. The upcoming election isn't just another political contest. It's the moment where voters decide whether this administration continues or whether the demands for accountability finally break through. If you want deep dive breakdowns like this every day, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and drop a like so more people see this video. This story isn't slowing down, and I'll be here every step of the way to walk you through what happens next.